What is up, guys? This is Nightmare, and today I have a Magicka Dragonite build for you all. This is called the Oblivion build. Now, just like my Stamina Dragonite build, recycled, this is going to be another off-meta build. So if you're looking for a build that has 50,000 max Magicka or 4,000 spell damage, this is not the build for you. What I am doing with these builds is I'm trying to be creative, trying to theory craft and see what sets would combo with what. So I'm taking in class-specific passives and abilities, certain buffs that are unique to them and make them strong, and then I am looking at armor sets that complement each other and complements the buffs and passives of the class. So the idea of this build is to be able to have perfect sustain with hardly any recovery. We are running a light armor builds, Destro staff and Resto staff. So that is going to be the playstyle for this. We are a backline damage dealer, not much of a tank, but we still have some pretty good resistance and health and decent survivability. But we are mostly a backline damage dealer with high burst. We can also do some ganking with this build, and we counter high health enemies. This build also counters projectile-based builds such as a Magicka Sorcerer or a Magicka Nightblade, as well as bow builds. We also counter shield stacking. So again, Magicka Sorcerer and Blaze Plars. And like I said before, enemies that have very high health, we counter those. The more health that the enemy has, the more damage we do. So I'm sure you guys can already assume what in the sets I will be running. Again, with the name of the build being Oblivion. So first off, let me go over the armor, since that is the most important and pretty much the creative aspect of the build. Okay, so right off the bat, you can see my Inferno staff. We have a sharpened Inferno staff of Night Slayer. Night Slayer is going to be our first 5-piece set. Now, as you can see, the 5-piece bonus is not active. That's because I'm on my Resto staff bar right now. So if I was switch over to the Destro staff bar, we now have our 5-piece Night Slayer. So why do we go with Sharpen? Sharpen's just going to give you the most damage output. And then we have an Oblivion damage enchant. That is just to complement our 5-piece bonus. Oblivion damage, if you do not know, is pretty much like true damage if you're coming from MOBA backgrounds or any other kind of backgrounds. It is unresistible damage. It goes through damage shields. It goes through resistance. It's a very strong, very unique damage type. So we are stacking 2 types of Oblivion damage with this build, the enchantment and our 5-piece bonus. Now, Night Slayer, we get a 2-piece max Magicka, a 3-piece spell damage, and a 4-piece max health. So the max health is going to be good. Now we aren't getting like tons of spell damage from this because of the sets we're running, but max health is going to help make us a little bit more tanky since we're in light armor. I'm also wearing a 1-piece heavy, 6 light, 1 heavy, just for more resistance and more max health. Okay, so we don't want to use poisons because we want the Oblivion damage enchant. And then for my back bar, like I said, you don't really need the Night Slayer on the back bar, just because the Destro staff is our main damage bar. So for the back bar, I went with a Maelstrom Resto staff. You can use defending. You can also use a Master's Resto staff, precise or defending. Defending would probably be best in slot, but I went with the Maelstrom staff because I've been using Rapid Regen. So it's just a little bit more sustain, and it gives our group more heals. But like I said, you don't have to use Maelstrom or Masters. You can just craft any no name or any Resto staff will work. 1-piece, I'm running a heavy Impin Infernal Guardian. You can use any monster set that gives max Magicka. I just went with the max Magicka just for more healing because I'm using Dragon's Blood. You can also go with Kina for the spell damage. And then here I have a max health enchant that's just to help with my my max health. Okay, so I got my Cyrodiil pop, so I'm gonna go ahead and go into Cyrodiil here. Alright, sorry about that, guys, but I just wanted to queue up for Cyrodiil because of the very long wait times to get into the champion point campaign. I just didn't want to wait um, a while for that to happen. So let's get right back into the builds, and the reason why I'm in Cyrodiil is so I can show you guys my buff stats later. And we don't have any bonuses, which is good. So let me go back into my armor. So like I said, Kina will work, or a Max Magicka, one piece bonus Max Magicka monster set. Heavy, and then I went with health enchant, like I said, to give me more max health, which is going to be nice. If you want, you can go with Max Magicka enchant, that's just going to give you more damage. Alright, so for the rest of our body pieces, we got our Night Slayer. So our chest is in pin, Max Magicka enchants. We got our waist, hands, or legs, and feet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then our 5th piece is on our staff. And then, as you can see, my second 5-piece set is going to be Elegant. Elegant is going to be in pin also, so we want all in pin on the body. And then I have 1 Divine's piece. You can go with 2 Divines or whatever if you want. So Elegant shoulders. Now, why am I going with Elegant? Well, my idea with this build was to benefit as much from heavy attacks as possible. Our heavy attacks are going to be our main damage source, our main burst damage, and I want to get them to hit as hard as possible. Since our Night Slayer is going to be proccing Oblivion damage, 9% of their max health, on heavy attacks, I'm going to be doing heavy attacks to get that to proc, so might as well get my heavy attacks to hit as hard as possible anyways, and then I just ended up turning my heavy attacks into my main damage source. So, Elegant is, or the Queen's Elegant set, it's been renamed. It is 2-piece spell damage, 3 and 4-piece Max Magicka, so more Max Magicka, which is good, and then our light and heavy attacks do 20% more damage. And then, as I go into my abilities later, you'll understand why this works the best on a Magicka Dragonite. We are speccing very highly into direct damage and heavy attack damage with this build, and our burst is huge. I'm able to hit 20,000 damage in just one light attack, or one heavy attack, excuse me, with the enchant proccing, the Night Slayer proccing, and then the rest damage from our from the Elegant buffing our heavy attack. And then I follow that up with an ultimate to hit the 20k damage. If I was just doing the heavy attack, I could hit about 10k, but adding in the ultimate right afterwards is finishing it off to hit 20k. And then jewelry is going to be Elegant. I have 1 recovery and then 2 spell damage. I like to get around 1,000 recovery. If you feel like you don't need it, that is fine. But I left 1 recovery, 2 spell damage. Honestly, you probably wouldn't even need the spell damage because you're getting so much Magicka return from heavy attacks, which is another idea with this build. Sustain is perfect because our heavy attacks restore Magicka. Okay, so let me go into food I use. Now, you can use the Witch Mother's Potent Brew. If you choose to use this, definitely put the 3rd piece, or the 3rd jewelry piece spell damage. But I've been using just Tri-Stat, max resource food, max health, max stam, max Magicka. The reason for that is I'm just used to whenever I play Magicka Dragonite, I have a little bit more stamina pool. I'm going to be doing a little bit more blocking, I can dodge roll a little bit more, etc. So I like the extra max stamina, which is why I went with this food. Potions, I just use throwaway junk Magicka potions. However, you can use immovable pots, or your essence of spell power pots are also very good. Alright, so with that, let me go into my skills first, which is also going to be very important for this build. Alright guys, so the skills I'm going to be using are very unique for this build. Now, this isn't going to be your standard Magicka Dragonite setup. We're not using whips, we're not using talons, we're not using fiery breath, none of that. We are straight Sorking it right now. When I say Sorking it, I'm using pretty much what a Sork would use, Crushing Shock or Force Pulse. We're staying at range with this build. Staying at range and putting out massive damage. Now, first ability is going to be Fossilized. This is going to be a hard CC. It's a ranged ability, 15 meters. It goes through block, and it's just a very strong ability. You can combo it with your Meteor if you have Meteor, or combo it around damage source, locking people down. This is going to be a hard CC and a soft CC. So after they get stunned and immobilized, they're still going to be rooted afterwards, so they have to break CC and then they have to dodge roll out of it. So it's a very good lockdown ability. Next, we are using Crushing Shock. Now, why am I going with Crushing Shock, not Force Pulse? And definitely, why am I not going with Whip? Like I said before, we want to stay at range. So keeping that in mind, we don't want to be getting in close and whipping people. And we're also not using Talons or anything like that to get our double whip. So Crushing Shock, and then Crushing Shock or Force Pulse is going to be our options. And then we're also going to get our Destro Staff ability to get those passives, single target passes from the Flame Destro Staff. And then why did I go with Crushing Shock over Force Pulse? Now, Force Pulse is going to give me more damage, yes, but Crushing Shock is going to give me the interrupts, which I find to be a little bit more important, especially since we're not using this for main damage, we're using our heavy attacks for main damage. This is more for utility, setting people off balance and interrupts. So you can stop stamina sorcerers from using Dark Deal, or certain casts can be interrupted that have a long cast time. What else? Resurrections, rezzing. You can stop reses from range, which is also very nice with Crushing Shock. So, Crushing Shock does less damage, but it's not our main damaging ability. Our heavy attacks are, so that's why we go with Crushing Shock. Now, Dragonfire skills is going to be front barred. Again, we're staying at range, so keeping that in mind, staying at range, if they're going to hit us from range, whatever, we're going to be able to reflect those abilities back at them. This is going to hard counter Magicka Sorcerers, Bow Builds, and Magicka Nightblades, Magicka Templars, anyone who's throwing projectiles at you, you can easily reflect it back. And I like having this on front bar, just because it's going to add to our damage output, just being able to reflect that damage back at them. It's also going to hit them 30% harder. If this was on our back bar, we wouldn't be casting it as much, and I find myself casting Dragonfire skills a lot more, and it's a lot more effective when it is front barred. And then for our heals, we're using, well, our heal combo, I should say, Igneous Shield and Coagulating Blood. Igneous Shield you're going to cast first, that's going to give you your Major Mending and a small little damage shield. And then Coagulating Blood is going to just give us a nice burst heal that scales off of missing health, and it scales off of max Magicka and spell damage. And it's also going to give us health recovery, which is not a big deal, but it is what it is. So this is going to be our main source of healing. Using this when you're very low is going to be more beneficial. And then comboing with Igneous Shield first and then Coagulating Blood makes it burst heal very high. You can get like a 4 to 5k heal from this. And then for our ultimate, I'm using Ferocious Sleep. Ideally, you would want to use Meteor. However, I don't want to get lore books for any other characters. It's just too much of a pain in the ass on console to do so. Meteor is going to be better, though, because you can use your Meteor and it has that long time before it hits the opponent, while it's like falling, and then your enemy is going to try to block the damage because it's telegraphed. You hit them with a Fossilize as they're blocking right before the Meteor hits, and they get hit by the full damage of the Meteor. Since Fossilize goes through block, you can stun them while they're blocking, and then boom, the Meteor hits them for full damage. So, Dragon Leap is still going to be good, though. This is going to be a way for us to get into a fight, kind of gap close. It's a huge AoE, hard CC, knocks people away, and it's also going to give us a damage shield. So usually we're using this to execute people when they get really low. So you can combo this with a heavy attack into Ferocious Sleep to one-shot people, which does work. Like I said, you can get 20k plus damage out of that combo, just a simple heavy attack Ferocious Sleep. And we're also using this defensively for the damage shields, and then Earth and Heart passives gives us resources back whenever we use an ultimate. Okay, so that's my main damaging bar. As you can see, we don't really have any damaging abilities. Crushing Shock is the only one doing that, but again, heavy attacks are our main source of damage. And then our back bar is going to be our utility and buff bar. We're going to get a little bit of damaging abilities here, and mostly just buffs and a couple heals. So I went with mutagen for this build. Now, usually when I make a resto staff build, and if I'm gonna put the rapid regen or whatever the base heal is, I'll usually put rapid regen just because it heals more. However, for this build, I went with mutagen, just because I want a little bit more burst heal in the removing one harmful effect. So whenever you drop below 20% health, you're going to get a little bit more burst healing. So it's going to save you whenever you get hit really hard, get almost one shot. You'll get a little bit of healing left, and I find that can save you most of the time. It's also a very good heal over time, and you can farm AP with this ability. This is going to kind of be a not so solo kind of play style. You want to play this in a small group. So that's keeping that in mind. You're going to be kind of group supporting. It's a very nice ability. So next off, we have Flames of Oblivion. This is just going to add to our burst damage. Every 5 seconds, you're going to shoot a little fireball that does about 5k flame damage. It's also going to give us spell critical buff by 10%. So Flames of Oblivion will hit at pretty much the same time as your heavy attack hits. It just adds to the burst damage. So let me go back to the rest of the staff. And then Volatile Armor, this is going to be a good buff. This is going to do an AoE kind of dot in the area, I guess. But this is going to remove Nightblades from stealth, which is really good. So if they stealth right up on top of you, you can pull them from stealth. This is also going to give us our physical and spell resistance buff, major resolve, and major ward. Make us a little bit more tanky. We're not really using this for the damage, mostly just for the resistance and pulling Nightblades out of stealth. This is a flex spot. I've been playing around with this ability slot. I really have a few different ideas of what I have, but right now I have Deep Breath there just for more healing, and then interrupts. Whenever you get Dove, it's going to be really tricky for you to move away. The one thing that Magic Dragonite or Dragonite in general doesn't have is like an escaping tool or a mobility tool. Like a Magicka sorcerer would have is Streak. What a Magicka Nightblade would have is their Shadow to teleport away or Cloak. So that's kind of what Magicka Dragonite is lacking. So whenever we get Dove, we want to be able to sustain ourselves long enough for our group support to help us out, or just stay alive and try to kill people. So Deep Breath is going to give us heal and a little bit of damage. However, if you want to use Talons, this would be the place to use it. As again, getting Dove, you can lock people down and try to reposition yourself, move away, dodge roll, do whatever you have to do to survive. Usually that route will give you enough time to be able to get away, which is good. Deep Breath is going to be more for, they're just going to stick right on top of you, you're just going to heal right through it. And Engulfing Flames is another option you can use. This is just going to increase your fire damage. So you hit them with the Engulfing Flames up close. This is going to be more for like dueling, I guess, if you're going to duel with this build, which you can do. It's not the best dueling build, especially for a Magicka Dragonite. But if you're going to duel, I would slot Engulfing Flames. It's a dot, so you're going to get a nice damage over time, keep pressure on them, and then 10% extra fire damage. So our heavy attack is going to be fire damage, so that'll hit 10% harder. Alright, and now down to the real ability of this build. This is really the only ability we would really need for this build using heavy attacks. Everything else is more for either buffs or group utility, or keeping us alive, heals, whatever. This is the most important ability. Major sorcery, so we're going to get spell damage by 20% for almost 40 seconds. A very long duration. I love that duration. You can just throw it on and pretty much forget about it for the rest of the fight. Now that second part there, 40% extra heavy attack damage. Fully charged heavy attacks increase by 40% while active. So this is the only class that gets this high of heavy attack damage. Sorcerers, stamina sorcerers can get it from their armor, but it's like 11%. This is 4 times more than that, and no other class gets this high of heavy attack damage. So we're using our Molten Armaments, our Elegance, and Night Slayer. Stacking all these together, our heavy attacks hit very, very hard. So this is what I was thinking of when I was theory crafting this, when I was like, well, I want to use Night Slayer. How can I use it effectively? Well, first thing I thought of was Magicka Dragonites have this Molten Armaments, or Dragonites have Molten Armaments. Their heavy attacks hit 40% harder. Okay, so how can I increase that damage even more? I can go with Clever Alchemist, but that's going to have a downtime, so I want something that's going to be consistent. I don't have to worry about keeping this buff up. I just heavy attack, and it's just going to do damage, and tons of damage. So Elegant, it's up all the time. I don't have to proc its damage to come up like Burning Spellweave. I don't have to use a potion like Clever Alchemist to get this buff, and it has that long downtime. It's just an easy, simple buff. So I'm loving this build right now. It's a lot of fun with just how easy it is to play. Its survivability is pretty good, and its damage output is just amazing. Alright, so last ability I went with Magma Shell. This is going to be for more group utility and just keeping you alive for a little bit longer. So this is going to give a damage shield to your group, and this is also going to make you pretty much unkillable for 11 seconds. Alright, so that is going to pretty much cover my abilities for racial passives. If you're not using a Dark Elf Dragonite for your Magicka Dragonite, I don't understand why, but Dark Elf is going to be the best for a Magicka Dragonite because you get, like, yeah, 7% flame damage. That's just huge. That's going to increase our Destro attacks by so much. Or Destro heavy attacks by so much. And even if you aren't using this build for a Magicka Dragonite, you just have so much flame damaging abilities, it's more beneficial to use a Dark Elf. However, you can go with High Elf. Their fire damage just isn't going to be as much. You're going to get more max Magicka by like 1% and a little bit more Magicka recovery. And then Breton is probably the third best pick, but Dark Elf is definitely going to be your best in slot pick for any Magicka Dragonite build. Alright, so next let me go into my champion points, because this is also going to be very important for this kind of playstyle. Okay guys, so champion points. The champion point layout for this build is going to be very important because we're pretty much just focusing on our heavy attacks. We don't have dots. Direct damage is the main sources of our damage. Alright, so 51 into Master at Arms. This is going to increase direct damage abilities or attacks by 19%. So our heavy attacks are going to hit 19% harder from Master at Arms. Our heavy attack is a direct damaging ability. 59 into Staff Expert for 29% extra light and heavy attack damage from Destro and rest of staff attacks. So, again, keeping that in mind, our Destro staff is going to hit 29% harder. I have 1 into Spell Erosion. That's just what I have left over. 49 into Elemental Expert for 11% more fire damage. Again, our Destro staff heavy attack is going to be fire damage. But it's also going to increase Flame, Frost, and Shock and magic damage, so our Crushing Shock is going to hit harder also. So that's also going to get buffed. 37 into Blessed, 9% extra healing done. This is going to be good for our Coagulating Blood, our Mutagen. And then Elfborn, 6% extra crit damage. So, our crits are going to hit harder. We don't have a lot of crit chance with this build, so I didn't want to throw too many points into there. But extra crit damage is good. So for the green tree, I kind of threw stuff around a little bit. Starting here, I got 20 into Warlord, so reduced cost is 9% cheaper. Very good. We don't get stunned and then not being able to break free. 56 Arcanist, 12% magic recovery. 64 Tenacity, 13% extra magic return on heavy attacks. Heavy attacks is going to be our main source of sustain. you have absolutely no sustained problems with this build. We are heavy attacking all the time for our main damaging source. Our main damaging source is also going to be returning Magicka to us. And it's a lot of Magicka just from one heavy attack. We're really using our Magicka just for our utility. Our Crushing Shock is going to interrupt our heals, buffs, pretty much all that. Really, you'll never drop below half Magicka unless you're spamming your heals trying to stay alive. 28 Tumbling, this is just going to allow me to dodge roll a little bit more, so reduced dodge roll cost 12%. Shadow Ward, 16% reduced block. I'm probably going to take points out of here but and move it around a little bit, but for now, reduced block is still going to be very good. And then 2 into Shade, this is just my leftover points for 1% reduced cost on sneaking. I didn't have anywhere else to throw those, so they went into Shade. And then for my red tree, I have 27 quick recovery for 7% increased healing received. This is going to help us stay alive a little bit more. Coagulating blood and mutagen. 20 into Bastion. Before I was playing around with Harness Magicka, so I wanted a little bit more bigger damage shields. That our Igneous Shield is also a bigger shield also, so 9% increased damage shield. I could probably take a little bit points out of here, move them around, but for now, 20 into Bastion is fine. 20 Thick-Skinned, 49 Elemental Defender, 49 Hardy. We want that Unchained passive, even though we don't have any stamina abilities, I don't think. But 9% reduced dot damage, and then 11% damage reduction across the board. 36 into Resistance, that is going to increase our crit resistance by another 976, which is very good. Alright, so let me show you my buff stats real quick. Now, they're not going to look impressive, of course, because we're using Night Slayer, which is pretty much a proc set, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then Elegance is just increasing our heavy attack damage by 20%. So stats aren't going to look very pretty, I guess. Not look very impressive. But this is what I'm working with. So 36,000 max Magicka, which is a pretty big Magicka pool. I got 1200 magic recovery, which is enough with this build, since we're using heavy attacks for our main damaging source. Like I said, it's also going to be restoring Magicka. I have 23,000 max health, which is good. It's going to make us a little bit tanky. A little bit over 14,000 max stamina. That's with the food I'm using. I like a little bit more Magicka, or stamina, with my Magicka Dragonites. It's just going to allow us to block a little bit more too. And then spell damage, we're looking at 2,300 spell damage. Again, it's not a lot. It's not like 3,000 or 4,000, anything like that. But we do have that big max Magicka pool to make up for the low spell damage. But spell damage is not going to be important. We are using Elegant, 20% increased heavy attack damage. Crit resistance looks pretty good at about 2,500. My resistance is going to be 19,000 spell and 14,000 physical. We have 32% spell critical. However, if I was to use a potion, or let's just say I have Flames of Oblivion on the front bar, my spell critical goes up to 42%, which is very good. But, like I said, you can use potions to get that same buff. I don't think there are any other stats I really need to show. Weapon damage isn't important. Stam recovery, 500, not really a big deal. I'm using the Atronach Munza Stone for magic recovery. I do like to have at least 1,000 magic recovery. You can go with less, you can go with more, whatever you're comfortable with. And then, yeah, we don't have any other multipliers right now from being in Cyrodiil. So that's going to cover my buff stats and my champion points. Well, this is going to be the end of the build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's another very unique off-meta build. Something I'm trying to do is just making off-meta builds, being a little bit more creative, theory crafting, But of course, there are gonna still be meta builds if you're looking for that. Um, don't worry, I still got meta builds if you look for that. Um, Point of being off meta, if you don't know what a meta is pretty much meta meaning, the easiest way I can explain it is what everyone else is using, pretty much. Meta is like using best in slots, just being the strong whatever. If you want an exact definition, feel free to look it up. You'll probably be able to explain it a little bit better. But that's the best way I can explain it. Off meta is doing something that doesn't really make sense. So this would be an off meta build. You don't really see anybody else running around with a heavy attack focused Magicka Dragonite builds that can one-shot people. Just being unique, being creative, thinking of your own builds. It's a lot of fun. And it takes a little bit more skill. And some of the skill is being able to recognize what combos well with other things. So that's just something if you want to start making builds on your own, just keeping that in mind that you don't always have to use what everyone else uses or use what is strong. You don't always have to use Viper or whatever. Just be creative, and that's probably one of the most fun things about making builds is you can just think of something, write it down, write it on or type it on a computer or whatever, and then you're able to put it together in game and see how strong it is. It's very satisfying. So again, if you enjoyed the builds, or if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me down in the comment section below. If you like the build, please like. If you want to see more content from me, all my other builds, please subscribe. I will be updating more builds. I got more builds coming. If you haven't checked out my past builds, you should definitely go check those out. I got gameplay on my channel also. So until next time, I will see you all later.